Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the C Squared podcast. We have a very special episode today because we are going to be talking about the upcoming World Chess Championship, the match between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren. We will also be discussing about Fabiano's match in the grand finals of the Champions Chess Tour against Hikaru Nakamura. So we have a lot of very exciting topics to cover today. So let's get straight into it. All right, Fabi, here we go. One day after the grand finals of the Champions Chess Tour, that didn't go your way. It was a difficult couple of matches against Hikaru, but sum it up for us.
Yeah, it was a very strange affair, I have to say. I don't really know what either of us were doing. Um, we both played pretty poorly, I have to say. It was a very low quality match. I think we were playing a little bit too casually. Not that we didn't want to win, of course. We both
Yeah.
wanted to win, but I think maybe it's not that we weren't taking it seriously, but we were a bit too cavalier in our approach. We weren't trying to or maybe not consciously, but we weren't putting up the best sort of, defense and the best sort of strategy for match play, which is I think that you play super safe,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
generally speaking, with the white pieces, and then you try to provoke your opponent a bit. It was the exact opposite. We were both playing rather wild and uncontrolled and rather reckless chess.
Yeah.
And
Any reason for that? Did you feel like, because let's preface this, you had two lives going into this one by virtue of winning the winner's bracket, all right? So you had some leeway to experiment with things. Did you feel like that played a bit against you psychologically during the match? Did you feel any extra pressure because of that at all?
No, I have this general feeling that besides the fact that you get two chances, that there is also a psychological advantage in terms of if you lose the first match. I think the person who lost the first match has a psychological advantage, which sounds a bit strange, but I have this feeling that after you win a match, you start to relax a bit.
Yeah.
So even if you make that comeback, like you win the first match, I there's this like maybe it's not for everyone, and I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really speak to this too much. But I have a feeling there's this general relaxation, like you did the job, but of course you didn't actually do the job. You only won one match and still a full match to go. So that's my feeling. In terms of like let's say my approach to the match, I don't know. The first game was really important because I was completely winning. I caught him out in an opening in which Magnus played against me, so I had an idea. I thought maybe Hikaru will know this line. It's sort of like the move C takes D5 in the Nimzo, which I played.
Yeah.
It's not really important, the subtleties of the opening, but basically this move was introduced sort of into high level play in like 2009.
Yeah.
And I remember very distinctly because I was playing in Biel and Boris Gelfand in the first round plays this against me, C takes D5. And Biel was a closed tournament I was playing in. And on another board, there was this game, Morozevich Alexeyev. And at the exact same time, in the same round, Morozevich and Alexeyev play the same position. Morozevich plays C takes D5. Alexeyev responds with a pawn sacrifice. Morozevich eventually wins. I'm looking at that game and I'm thinking, this is really uncomfortable. I don't want to copy Alexeyev's moves. So it's always uncomfortable when two games are going on with the same opening position because you don't
Yeah.
want to play the same moves. Anyway, so I remember very distinctly. Basically, it was supposed to be dead because of a game which Carlsen played with White against Kramnik. Kramnik was the way Kramnik played was supposed to have killed the line, but then Carlsen played against me in Blitz, and I started checking it, and I realized it's not so simple. So I thought, why not? I'll go for it. And yeah, it was actually a good opening choice. I mean, I should have won that game. I had every chance to win, and to lose was absolutely insane and ridiculous. And
Yeah, yeah, and he
um,
he actually did mention that he made some mistakes in the opening. He forgot perhaps his preparation, or he just automatically made the wrong natural move, and then because you repeated on your second white, and then he changed. Tune played a better move order. Were you surprised by this fact at all? The fact that he, let's say, misstep early on in the opening in that first game?
so I had this feeling when picking the line that everyone and their grandmother remembers that after c takes d5, you can play knight e4, and black is supposed to be doing well.
Yeah.
And that knowledge might actually go against someone, the knowledge that black is doing well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because in reality, of course, the position is roughly equal. It's not like black is better. But in the past engines said black was better. Now engines have adjusted and they say more or less black is equal, which is pretty much the truth, right? Black equalizes in basically a dozen ways, but it's never so simple. Even if you have a dozen ways, you still have to play accurately after that. So in the first game, I wasn't surprised that Hikaru, misplayed it a bit, but I was surprised just how good my position was,
Yeah.
which was basically I had a position which was between much better and objectively
Winning.
technically winning, you'd
Yeah.
say, right? I'm a pawn and it's pretty much a technical task. And yeah, everything went wrong. Just basically my whole um my time management when I didn't take on d6, just chop off the knight and play a very simple pawn up position. Instead, I played a very complicated position, which was still good for white.
Yeah.
My time management, my play, every decision making, it was like I was very slow, heavy. And then, of course, once I got into time trouble, I did this. Like I allowed the trade of queen. Suddenly, it's difficult for me. It's very difficult to play, and I'm low on time. And then also, I didn't play e4. I mean, obviously, the best
Yeah.
defensive chance, but that I allowed the trade of queens. I mean, I just have a bishop on g3 and complete control over the position. I can do what I want, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so I was out of it that game, and then the
You
second game I was also out of it.
you
I
did bounce back, and it was kind of back and forth, and a lot of games were being won with the black pieces.
Yeah, the second game I was also out of it. I played poorly in the opening. I fell into a well-known trap, which was played in like Svidler Mamedyarov. I kind of realized that I was falling into it, but like somehow couldn't stop myself. I was a bit on tilt at the moment.
Yeah.
And then instead of like him exploiting that, he basically mixed up the move order. Basically, Rook G1 is the right idea, and he
Yeah.
knew that. But first you play Bishop D5, then after that you play Rook G1, and Black is under a huge attack and basically close to losing. Instead, he played Rook G1 first, and then Black is just completely fine. Um, and he misplayed it. He didn't seem to understand the dangers that White has.
Yeah.
I have a feeling he thought that he was playing the right way, and this like caused some sort of like misevaluation in his mind because he thought, okay, Rook G1, I'm much better. And then, but the truth is that, of course, the idea is right, but the execution was wrong. And instead of being much better, the position is equal. But then you think you're much better, and it colors your entire play afterwards.
Yeah.
So that game was an important bounce back. Then I lost again, very stupidly, basically defending from dead lost, and then I just have to make one move, Bishop B5, and I will never lose this position. Um, because at that point, like Black is the one who has to be careful he doesn't get checkmated or something, you know. Instead, I just blunder Queen B2 check. I lose that game. Then I thought the fourth game was kind of funny. I mean, he plays the Mora Gambit, needing a draw.
Yeah.
At first, I thought this was like some sort of he wants to get some content out of it, like he wants to have
Well,
fun with it.
that's what he said. Yeah.
Which I'm not like okay. I mean, I trust that that's what if he said that he's telling the truth about that. But I also have a feeling that he kind of analyzed it
Oh, I'm sure
because
he did. Yeah. No, I'm sure he
I don't
analyzed
think
it.
he just played it, on the fly because he in both games that he played it, he came up with this Queen B3 long castle, which I haven't seen this idea before.
Yeah.
In the Mora, like normally in the Mora, you castle short and you try to pressure the pawn on D6, and then he was going for some Queen B3 long castle stuff. In the second time he played the Mora,
No, for
really
sure he
unusual.
analyzed it. He said that he looked at it for Magnus. So this was a weapon that he preferred against Magnus. Obviously, he wanted to get some content out of that, beating the world champion with the Smith-Morra Gambit. But
Yeah, no, I think it
he,
was a mix that he was ready to play a sort of you could say Mimi sort of line,
right,
sacking a pawn against the world champion, or sacking a pawn needing only a draw. It's like it makes good headlines,
yeah,
and the truth is probably that the Smith Morra Gambit. Uh, I don't want to just say Morra because I'm leaving out this guy Smith, and I don't want to do that. And like the Smith Morra Gambit is maybe not so bad
it's
for
not that
White.
bad. No, 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 it's
Yeah,
not. I think it equalizes.
yeah, yeah. No, that's
I
that's
think
my
it's an
feeling.
opening
That
that equalizes basically.
and then you have to think like what's wrong with that? I mean, you can play like normal Sicilians, which are objectively equal, most of them, right? Or you can play the Smith Morra Gambit, which is also objectively equal. Just maybe it gives Black more freedom of choice.
Hmm.
But in that case, what's the big deal? Like you know it well, you're probably not going to get a worse position. It seems like a fairly reasonable choice because I can't say I've really analyzed the Smith-Morra Gambit. I mean, who really analyzes it? Because after C3,
I haven't
I can play
analyzed it in at least a decade.
like black can play knight f6, and then you transpose to a C3 Sicilian. Like there's
That's
no
actually
point
what
to a
I do.
Smith.
That's actually
There's no point to a
yes,
Smith-Morra Gambit. But of course, if someone plays a Smith-Morra against me when I need to win,
you're gonna
I'm
take
not
the
going to play
pawn,
knight f6, and I'm not going to play d3 or whatever. I'm going to take the
take the
pawn because I
pawn.
need to
Yeah,
win.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in like a normal game, I would think it's kind of stupid. Like, why would you play the Smith Morra? No offense to any fans of the Smith Morra Gambit, but in this situation, it's kind of a funny but not an unreasonable choice.
Hmm.
But anyway, it was very funny, and I did smile when he played it the first time. The second time, I expected it. I was like, okay,
he's
Hikaru,
he's gonna go for it. Yeah.
he's going to go for it again, which is why I was like very calm in that situation that I need to win black because I think he's going to play it again, and I haven't analyzed it at all since the first game, but uh, but it's going to be a mess somehow.
So you
And
didn't get any analysis going on in between games.
no, I mean,
There's
like,
no time probably. You just want to
yeah, there
like
wasn't really any
refresh
time.
in
It was
between
like 5 minute
games.
break.
Yeah,
What are you going to analyze?
yeah. No, it
Uh,
makes sense.
so so yeah, then I won that game. It was actually very nice game.
That was a great game. I really liked it.
And then of course it came down to this random, rather
Armageddon.
random Armageddon game. Uh, yeah, what can I say? Like this was just the culmination of I'm playing rather stupidly, and to be honest, so is he. Like, no offense, but
No,
we
you
were
had
both
some
playing.
options. You had some chances, right? I think you had
Yeah, yeah.
knight takes g6. The other knight you took with the wrong knight, and after that, it kind of the
No,
attack
no, no, no.
mellowed
That's
down,
not
right?
that's not true at all.
Weren't you supposed to take with the h knight?
Well, you can take with either knight. They're both rather unclear objectively,
Yeah.
but I was winning. And I saw the way to win. I
Oh,
was
even that with
objectively,
e5. You had an
yeah,
e5 at
yeah.
some point.
I saw
Yeah.
this move, and basically, so I only spent 30 seconds on this, and I felt like I spent more time on this decision, but I only spent 30 seconds looking back on it, which was not enough time. But the first move I thought of was e5. It's like it just screams out to be played. And then I thought, okay, he takes because knight f7 looks like it loses to knight f5 or whatever,
Hmm.
which isn't true. You have to play f4 after knight f7. But anyway, knight f7 looks like a bad move. So he takes, then white takes, queen takes. And the most obvious move here is f4. And then I see f4. Okay, he has to play knight f3 here. And then I saw bishop takes f3, queen h5, bishop h5, c3. He wins. He wins my bishop because of his passed c pawn, and I'm never going to win this position.
Yeah.
And basically, on the basis of that calculation, I rejected e5,
Mm.
which was a rush. But it was a sort of rush decision you make in Armageddon because you think I need to keep an advantage on the clock. It was um, very nice. Let's say, in hindsight, a very bad decision because uh, I had 7 minutes 30. He had like 5 minutes, a bit less.
Hmm.
So I had plenty of time. And if I had thought a little bit, I would have seen f4, knight f3. I have the move queen takes f3, and probably a winning position, but very complicated endgame. And if I had thought a little bit more after that, I would have seen that instead of f4 immediately, I can give a check on g6 first.
Yes.
The king has to move, and then I play f4. And although I will say that even though it's objectively winning, it is still is a very tough fight because he has a c pawn. It never goes away, and it's one of those positions where it can always you can always lose control. So I'm not saying that it was like in the bag that I was winning the game, but considering the time situation, considering the advantage I would have had, I would give myself like 70%, maybe 75 to win that position
Yeah.
if I had played e5 and queen g6 and f4.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a huge. I mean, after I played rook d2, basically, I have no ideas. He's super solid,
Yeah.
and I don't know what my last chance to keep the game going was knight to maneuver my knight from g h4 g6 f4, and then at least the game is complicated, but I keep it going. After I played queen c5, basically, I think uh, to win this is kind of impossible because black doesn't have to think.
Yeah.
Like black is just consolidated. White can't move any pawns, any pieces. White basically has to shuffle and hope not to lose. So that was it. Yeah, e5. That was basically the match. I mean, it was more or less um a day of one move.
Yeah. No.
That being said, he had like a million ways to win before that. So of course, if I had played e5 and won, he would have had his own regrets about why he
No,
didn't take
I think
on G3.
none of these matches are going to be perfect, right? But it was a back and forth matches. I think for the most part, you guys provided a lot of entertainment for everybody, and we are all happy with that. And how would you assess, let's say, your not necessarily your performance, because obviously your performance throughout the Champions Chess Tour has been pretty good so far, but how would you assess your chances to get to that final in December, which I think is the main goal for a lot of the players participating in this one?
Okay, so well, I'll say that yeah, that is the main goal to qualify for that. Of course, when you're basically like one match away from winning the title, it feels like that's the more important goal, right?
Yeah.
From winning one of these Champions Tour events, like it's its own goal in itself, and then you don't have to worry about the rest. Um, I can find some, let's say, uh, comfort in that I even though I missed my big chance to win one of the events, I do have a very very good points standing. I have 150 points.
Yes.
The players with more points are Hikaru with 250 points. I think he's leading with 250,
And Magnus, right?
and Magnus with 225, I think. But their points are kind of irrelevant because they have qualified already because they both won one of the events. So from that point of view, I'm third place by points, but not counting them, then I'm kind of leading the points race.
Yeah.
If I win one of these events, I don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's still the goal. And after me is Wesley. Of course, Wesley is always consistent, so he's 105 points. And the good news for me is that I also qualify for the next event, which is held May 22nd to 26th, the next Division One event, and that means that I have a direct chance to win Division One. I don't have to go through the whole play-in phase, which is kind of a random draw. Like,
I'll play that one.
yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna
I
play
mean,
that one April 17th, I think it
maybe
is.
I'll see you in Division One.
The next one.
Maybe we'll play.
I'll try it out. Yes, I'll try it out. I have a feeling if you see me in Division One, they're gonna put like 5 cameras on me.
Oh yeah, of course.
Accuse me of cheating and whatnot. Anyway, that's that with the Champions Chess Tour. That's behind us, but what's in front of us, and in fact, in the next few hours from this recording, is the beginning of the World Championship match between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren. That's going to determine who's going to be the 17th world champion. So quite a big deal. Whoever wins that one is going to enter the annals of history as the next champion after Magnus Carlsen. So obviously that's going to have a pretty significant place in the history books. Very cool. Now, very intriguing way in which both of these players have reached this match, specifically Ding Liren, by virtue of Magnus deciding not to defend his title. So we'll be discussing about that in just a second as well. Let's discuss the what do you want to start with, actually?
Yeah. So, well, we should mention that Jan's path to the World Championship match was not unusual. It was basically the standard path, which was he qualified for the candidates tournament. In this case, his qualification was because he was a loser of the last World Championship match against Magnus. So, but that is the standard system, right? The loser gets an invite back to the candidates.
Into the candidates, yes.
And then he won the candidates without much competition, we have to admit. He was leading from the first round, tied leading in the first round and the second round, and then basically was the clear leader from that point forward.
Yes.
So Jan won in the standard way. Ding qualified for the match in the most non-standard way. I don't know if this has ever happened before.
I want to say that no. So we're gonna go with no for the moment.
It's happened that world champion has abdicated, but when it happened against Karpov just became the world champion, right?
Yeah.
So Fischer didn't want to play in 1975, so Karpov became the world champion. Now the regulations are different. I think also at some point Alexander Alekhine passed away. I think he died in 1946.
Hmm.
In 1948, they had another system. So, but this is also kind of a new situation because Ding also did not really, I mean, he didn't qualify in the normal way for the candidates tournament.
Mm.
He qualified in a very unusual way, to put it
Yes.
mildly.
That is because Karyakin was suspended by FIDE for 6 months for his comments on the Russia-Ukraine war. And obviously that opened the path for the next challenger based on the rating. And I think it was Ding Liren, but unfortunately for him, at that point, once they found out he didn't have enough games being played in the last whatever it was, like 6 months or something along those lines, so he had to play um I believe it was 30 plus games in like 3 weeks, and he did that against some of his compatriots in China.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's really important at this point. Um, Basically, FIDE has had this minimum amount of games so that people don't sit on their ratings. Uh, so it's always been that, like, let's say you achieve a 28, 40 rating in January,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rating list counts for like the full year, and it's an average of all the lists. So you don't just stay, with your 2850. Okay, I'm giving an extreme example, but you don't stay on your very high rating without playing, and it just stays like that. So this has been standard practice, and I've had to consider this in the past, although I've always stayed very active because I did qualify through the rating list one time.
Yes.
And and so that was, I mean, of course I did stay super active. And in fact, at that in that particular case, it was a very close rating race between Kramnik, Wesley, and myself.
Yeah.
So the unusual thing is that, and we do have to say, yeah, Ding didn't really get opportunities to play because this was throughout the whole COVID, situation.
It was very
And
difficult to get out of China
yeah,
for him.
specifically for Chinese players, it
Yes.
seems like it was difficult. Although some Chinese players were traveling and playing, like I remember Yu Yang Yi was playing the FIDE Grand Swiss in Riga.
I want to say he established himself somewhere in Europe throughout the pandemic, and he was just staying around there, not going back to China and not having
Yeah,
to travel from the mainland.
yeah, I don't know exactly the situation, but anyway, he definitely faced some Ding faced some problems with traveling and
Yeah.
with playing tournaments. That being said, like if I were in charge of the regulations, I would have never accepted these tournaments.
Mm.
I mean, if I was making the rules for qualification, I would never allow tournaments with players from one country.
Yeah.
And this is not because I don't trust people, but this is simply because that's the standard way of doing it. When we're talking about getting grandmaster norms, you can't get a grandmaster norm if you're playing against players only from one country.
You have to play international events with at least 4 federations. There is a bunch of rules about it. So yes, it
From
makes
my
perfect
understanding,
sense.
the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
it
don't
is the
see
case. That is the case.
I I don't see why the candidates rating list would have more lax rules than the Grandmaster International Master titles. I mean, this is a much more important and, let's say, consequential qualification, right? I
Yes.
mean, a lot of people get Grandmaster norms. Well, not a whole lot, but a lot more than people who qualify for the candidates.
Yes.
So I think that you should have very strict regulations, and it's not a fair situation that one player, can't play because
Hmm.
he hasn't been able to travel. But sometimes things aren't fair, and in this case, it would have gone to, maybe it was Shakir Mamadiyarov, or maybe it was Levon Aronian. I don't remember who was the
Next one
next
on the
team,
rating list. Yes.
but it would have gone to one of those players, I think, or maybe Anish. I'm not 100% sure,
Yeah.
but in any case, um, I think that would have been the correct way of doing it. But these regulations were in place. I don't think they considered that one player might not play the candidates and so on.
Cool.
Unfortunately, with FIDE, they don't like always think these things out
Yeah.
too much.
So let's talk about this. First of all, let's remind the viewers that this is going to be the best out of 14. Whoever reaches 7.5 points is going to be winning the championship, is going to become the new world chess champion. This is going to happen under classical time control. The time control is actually quite specific for the World Championship match. It's a very long time control, 120 minutes for the first 40 moves, followed by 60 minutes for the next 20 moves, and then an additional 15 minutes for the rest of the game. Starting on move 61, there will be a 30-second increment per move. So there's no increment up to that point, up to move 61. You've played under this specific rules in 2018 as well in your match against Magnus Carlsen. So was there any adjustment period? Because obviously this is something that we generally don't see in the chess circuit. Most of the tournaments are happening with a 30-second increment at least.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that there should be one uniform time control. I don't think that this is like for rapid, for blitz, and for classical. I mean, it's kind of crazy that you have FIDE events where you have a time control of 90 minutes plus 30 seconds, and then you have a time control which can last, 6, 7 plus hours.
Yes.
So there should just be some uniformity because like these time controls change the game. And they don't change the game massively, but they do change the game. So also from a pure like you know marketing and television point of view, okay, we should be shortening the classical time control a bit. We shouldn't be going longer and longer. I'm not saying that we should make the games 30-minute games, but we should keep them relatively light in terms of how long they can last. And this just adds more interest, I think, from the public. This I don't think the players would mind. I think they would be fine with it.
Yeah.
And it also lessens the value of preparation a little bit and makes it um, less likely that you're going to have really, 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 uh, dry games where neither side can pull much out.
Absolutely. And I think this is also partially why Magnus decided to abdicate his title, just for the simple fact that he doesn't like the format. Now, perhaps on the other side of the coin is whenever you don't have the increment, you could see some fireworks happening towards the end of those time controls, right? So
Yeah.
from from a viewer's perspective, once you reach those last few minutes, obviously it can become quite exciting. At the same time, it's just the last few minutes from like a 7-8 hour game, right? So the percentage of excitement is not that much for sure. Let's talk
Yeah.
about
The other thing is that
yes, go ahead.
you may have these like intense time trouble phases for sure, but it will be prefaced by like if that happens, it'll be because they're taking very laborious decisions in the post opening phase.
Yes.
And those will be some boring moments to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to be talking about it because I'm doing commentary for the last half on the chess.com broadcast team. But if right after the opening phase and there's this like decision that Ding has to make or Nepo has to make, where it's like the position is basically equal, but they want to make sure that it's as equal as they want to play the most accurate way so that they don't get into any sort of position where they have to deal with annoying pressure. They just try to kill the game with the black pieces. This is not going to be a super exciting moment to talk about. That being said, yeah, we'll probably see some time trouble. And in my match against Magnus, we also had some crazy games. So, like the first game, of course, was totally nuts, where I was dead lost and
Mm-hmm.
also
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
living off the increment. And there, the end game where I was winning was also kind of nuts. We'll see time trouble phases. We'll see
Yes.
some crazy moments. I'm have no doubt it's a long match, but we're gonna also see a lot of just we're gonna have to try to talk it up and dramatize it, in the way that like Maurice Ashley is amazing at, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you have no content happening and you have to like make a story out of it.
No.
So yeah.
Now let's talk about their recent form as well. That's another topic that I wanted to discuss with you. Also, let's touch a little bit on their current score. If I'm not mistaken, Classical NEPO is leading 3-2 with 9 draws, 4-2 in Rapid, and 4-1 with 2 draws in Blitz over the board. This is not included, including the online championships, the Chess 24 championships, things of
Yes.
that nature. So overall, it seems like actually Nepo leads in the online ones as well, 26.5 to 19.5. Looking at the
Okay, so
numbers,
I will say the reason
yes.
that they've played so many of these games is I do remember them at some point playing a chess.com speed chess championship match, which
Ah,
includes
okay.
bullet games. So I don't know if I would put much weight into that
I don't think I
because
included the bullet games. No.
yeah, it's like yeah, even if it's just splits, it's yeah, these on like on long online matches. I do remember Nepo winning that, and I think it was a year where when Hikaru won, and I think Hikaru beat Jan.
Yes.
But Jan beat Ding if I'm remembering correctly. So I wouldn't put too much weight into the online stuff, but what I would put weight into is that the so I don't remember I only remember one of Ding's classical wins, but I remember two of Jan's classical wins, and they were both in the candidates. I think one was like back in 2016, and it was quite a long while back, but two were quite recent. One was in the candidates with the white pieces in Andy Marshall, very important, of course, because Jan did win that candidates, right? Ding did not.
Yes.
And the last one was the most recent game. I think everyone remembers the first round of the candidates, one which basically marked a clear separation between Jan and other players. Well, especially Ding early on, because Ding was considered one of the favorites for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Ding lost with the white pieces in round one against Jan, and that started Jan's run, of course.
Yes.
He never lost a game in that tournament, but he did win a bunch more. So the two most recent classical games that I remember, besides some draws, were Jan's wins, and Ding did beat him in Croatia Grand Chess Tour event 2019. But yeah, overall, it's a bit in Jan's favor.
Speaking of that, and now that we get to get your expert opinion and expert analysis, let's discuss those games because we do have those 3 games ready, and perhaps you have been looking at them and you know where the critical moments are. So let's discuss those, and perhaps give us your insight about what was going on in those particular games. So let's get right into it. We're going to start chronologically. Let's start with the victory from Croatia that you mentioned, the victory
Mhm.
of Ding. And yeah, let's get right into that.
Sure. So before we go into this game, opening wise, so in this game, Ding started with c4.
Mm-hmm.
Opening wise, Ding is traditionally a closed opening player, and by that I mean d4, c4, knight f3 first move.
Yes.
Catalan, classical like d4, c4, knight f3 lines, and so on and so forth. Jan is traditionally an e4 player. He's branched out a bit recently. He started playing a lot of knight f3 stuff, a lot of c4 stuff, a lot of like kind of uh, Catalan-esque or quasi-Catalan lines. But he is a traditionally an e4 player, and even more he's known for is the Scotch. And then he stopped because the Scotch you basically can't play anymore in the long term. But there's a very clear stylistic difference in their opening approach with the white pieces. Anyway, so Ding started c4 in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Jan played e5, a
Yes.
choice which is relevant because he also played it to beat Ding in the last candidates tournament. That's how he won the game, right? C4 e5, reverse Sicilian.
Yes.
G3, knight f6, bishop g2,
D5.
d5. So in somewhat relevant as well. Uh, the way that Jan beat Ding in the last candidates was he played second move c6. So he was going for c6 systems. Here he went for d5 systems. Very, very important distinction and choice for black in in all these lines.
Yes.
So knight f3, knight c6,
I think c takes
castle.
d5, knight takes d5, knight f3,
Ah,
knight
yes.
c6, castle, bishop e7, d4.
Yeah, so bishop e7 is considered a slightly dubious move, usually because of knight b6 first is like the transposing to, or can transpose in case of knight c3, bishop e7 to some of like the biggest reverse Sicilian lines, the most heavily researched and played and analyzed thousands of games.
Yep.
Bishop b7 allows d4,
Hmm.
and then e4, knight e5, f5, take take. This is like a big theory line,
Yes.
but it's considered rather dangerous for black. And so Jan went for it, uh, but it's a risky choice. I don't think that this is a sort of line he would go for, you know, in the match,
Hmm.
because black is considered to have better theoretical choices.
And before we go more into depth with the analysis, for people that are just listening to this on Spotify or any of these listening platforms, you can see the analysis and you can follow the analysis if you go to YouTube. So go to YouTube, like, subscribe, you know the deal. Let's keep going, Fabi.
Yeah, so queen c2, and already Jan played a bad move. So
Knight to
at this
b4.
period, like Jan was not known for his good openings prior to the match. I think once he won the 2020 candidates, and let's remind viewers this was 2019.
Yes.
Once he won the 2020 candidates and he started to develop a team for the World Championship match, his openings became extremely, extremely good. Like now he's just a very, very well prepared player.
Yes.
And you won't find a single top player who will dispute that. But back then he did have a lot of holes in his openings. So knight b4, kind of just like it's a mistake in a very theoretical position. So you would classify it as sort of a yeah, a mistake that a
Unforced
top
error.
player,
Like in
yeah,
tennis, it's an unforced error.
you
Yes.
can call it an unforced error. In this specific thing, it's like basically double faulting.
Yes. You, you
Because
you're supposed to know these
you're
things.
supposed to know. You're
Yeah.
supposed to know basically that you play queen d7. It's a weird looking move. Queen d6 might look like a bit more natural, but queen d7 is the best move.
Hmm.
Knight b4, queen a4, bishop d7. Like this is, I think, showing that he just didn't know the line very well. A3, knight d5, knight c3,
Yes.
um, bishop to d6.
Yes.
Again, probably not a great move. Black is delaying his castling too long. Probably should have castled.
Hmm.
But the reason he didn't castle is because he was afraid of queen c4, and then suddenly you can't play bishop b6 because there's queen takes c6 stuff. So you have to make some slightly weird move.
Yes.
So bishop d6, f3.
Yes.
White is striking very logically in the center, because black isn't castled, and the only problem for white in this position is the bishop on g2 is a rather restricted piece. So f3 is opening up the bishop.
Hmm.
ef3, bishop f3. So black has to deal with the problem with the knight on d5. It's a very big problem. You don't have a comfortable place to put it, and if you trade on c3, then you have to deal with the fact that c6 pawn is hanging. Knight b6. It does solve the problem of the knight and the pawn of c6, but after queen b3, black cannot castle.
No more castling. Yeah.
Queen f6, very logical. You want to play queen f7 because, well, you have to castle somehow.
Yes.
And he also didn't want to allow white the time to play e4. So he was thinking, okay, I'll attack d4, multi-purpose move, and prevent e4 while I'm at it.
Yes. Bishop e3.
Bishop e3.
Queen to g6.
Now, yeah, queen g6, maybe queen f7. It's time for this. I don't know.
Hmm.
Of course, black is a bit worse in any case, but I guess he should have tried to. I feel like he was still like in this sort of gambling mode,
Hmm.
because he saw white's king is a little bit also on the vulnerable side, so he decided to play queen g6. But if you think about it, black is not really uh, situated for an attack. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, okay,
I
yeah,
want to say this gambling aspect was definitely part of his game. It was almost like a tenet of his game. You knew you were playing NEPO. You knew there's going to be some gambling. You also knew that he's going to play extremely fast, right? But now I want to say that he's become much more precise in his moves, especially in the opening phase, and kind of that spills, that trend that he gets from his very solid openings spills into his middle game and end game. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
yeah. He's. I mean, Jan has always been a super gifted player, right? Always with a lot of potential. Nobody can doubt that. I mean, I remember in like 2000, I mean, like 2007 or something. I'm playing, maybe it was a bit later, but I'm playing in Gibraltar. Maybe it was 2011. I'm playing in Gibraltar, and after the tournament, I'm talking to Gregory Kaidanov, famous
Famous
grandmaster
coach. Yeah.
of Soviet origin who lives in the United States, right? Famous chess coach, also very strong grandmaster. And he was like, "Oh, do you know this guy NEPO?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, of course I know him." He's like, "The guy is like super, super talented," and uh, and that was still when he wasn't like a super strong player. I think it was probably 2007 because in 2011 he was already very good. Um, and I think he won the European Championship in 2010, if I'm remembering correctly. But he was always known as like the super gifted player. But everyone also knew that he's very erratic, right? He can take these very impulsive decisions, emotional decisions,
Yeah.
sometimes big blunders. And if you look at the great champions, you would not describe a single one of them as gamblers. It's just
Yes.
not a quality of a it can be a quality of a great chess player, but just not a quality of like the best in the world. Like you would never say Magnus gambles. I mean,
No. No.
at no point would you ever say that or he loses his cool or gets emotional. Players can take, let's say, calculated risks, but very often Jan was not taking calculated risks, but just, basically uh, praying that it works out, which is not a strategy at all.
Yeah.
So that's no longer an issue for him. He plays objective, correct chess. Obviously, if you win the candidates twice, you're already at that level of champion that uh, you don't pray that your opponent makes a mistake. You just play the best moves. That's what um, all the best players do.
Yeah.
So yeah, once he fixed that problem of basically trying to play or not trying to play the most objective chess, then his results improved a lot.
All right. Back to the game. Queen to g6.
Bishop
Bishop
f2,
to f2.
h5.
e4.
Yeah, this is like an attack which you kind of realize that you're not prepared for because your king's in the center, and after e4, white is actually the first to strike.
Yeah.
So what kind of attack is this? Where after h4, uh, white is attacking with tempo. E takes f5,
Queen takes
queen
f5.
takes f5, rook a to e1 with check, king d8. Again, white has many decent moves here because also a lot of white's pieces are around the king side. So black black's let's say from an intuitive point of view, it doesn't look like black's attack will work out because white has two bishops defending. That's quite a lot, and can also combine defense with attack by
Yeah.
playing knight e4 as he did.
Yeah.
So at this point, queen g6 is already like desperation, basically. If you attack, you go forward. You don't like move around queen g6. It's clear that the attack is going wrong. Knight d6, cd6. Also, even if you
d5.
gave black like three moves, I don't know what his attack is because hg3, bishop g3, the bishops defend everything there.
Yeah.
So d5, I don't know if it's the best move, but it looks like a good one. c5, a4, actually amazing move. Definitely one of Ding's strengths is that he is like a perfect calculator. So he does not have like these kind of, let's say, preconceptions about positions that you need to do this or that. He just calculates. So a4 is very clear. He was thinking, okay, I need to play a5. And after bishop a4, black's bishop is temporarily distracted. Now queen a3, and I threaten b4. So it's a pawn sacrifice, just concretely trying to get b4 in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Queen
Very
a3, and you
nice.
can't stop b4, which is a problem.
If you
And
go
also there's a threat of
a5,
rook e6, right? So
rook
rook
e6 as
e6,
well. Yeah.
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 So rook e8, he solved that ish threat of rook e6, kind of, but b4 came. Yeah, the problem is if you open up the position with taking, just like queen takes and b6 is falling. Black's king is in the center. That's the issue, right?
h4
Um,
is falling. I mean, this is just game over, right?
yeah, this is at this point very trivial for a strong player to win. So rook c8, take on e1, rook e1,
Mm-hmm.
take on g3, take
H
on
takes
g3,
g3.
dc5. King g2 is a bit funny, but basically every move wins here.
Yeah.
King g2 is just like, okay, I can slowly take the pawn on c5, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Well, he tried to stop it with queen c2, but now queen e3 came. Rook c7, queen e6. We're already talking about like every move winning.
Yeah.
Rook d7, d6, and king c8, rook h1, and black resigned because rook h8 you basically can't stop, or
Very.
not in any meaningful way at least. So this was a very, very clean win, and it was a win in all aspects of the game. Ding won in the opening, then he got an advantage. He rebuffed Jan's rather reckless attack, and Jan did not defend very tenaciously.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, most likely, there wasn't much you could do to defend.
Mm-hmm.
And Ding played perfectly. He basically played the first line from like move 19 forward. or
Yeah.
actually from move 18 forward, basically just first line from beginning to end. So absolutely flawless game, and Ding is very often capable of these sort of flawless games if things go his way, as in he gets the position that he's good at, the type of position he's good at, then he can basically play a perfect computer-like game.
And I want to say this was 2019, a very good year for Ding Liren. He also won the Singfield Cup in a tiebreak with Magnus against Magnus. Magnus hasn't lost a single tiebreak and a single playoff in, I think, more than a decade. Ding was the first one to defeat him in one of those. So that was a huge result for Ding. He was definitely on a roll.
Well, even
Nepo,
more so, he
yeah,
won that, but he also won the Grand Chess Tour.
the whole Grand Chess Tour.
Yeah, so he
Yeah,
beat Maxime in the final, and Maxime was the one who beat Magnus. So
yeah.
it was Ding beat, I can't remember who before. Maybe it was Levon, and then Maxime because it was two matches.
Yeah, but
And
Ding was
Max,
having a pretty good year, 2019.
yeah, Ding had a great year. Also, Nepo had a good year because he did qualify from the can to the candidates via the Grand Prix series, I think.
Hmm.
So good year for both of them. It ended up, of course, started marking the run of Jan's World Championship hopes because he won the candidates, which began in 2020, and Ding in 2020 did not really. He didn't win the candidates, and there was not much else you could do in 2020, right? So, but 2019 was for me the last great moment that Ding had. It sounds a bit strange now, but it was at the time he was super strong. He still is super strong, but we don't know how strong because he doesn't play. He plays rather seldomly.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
at the time he was playing very actively and winning a lot of tournaments.
So would you say that right now the trend favors Jan in terms of improvement, actual improvement in their skill? Let's take the last 3 years, 2020 to 2023. As you already mentioned, you think that things 2019 was more or less his peak. Um, Jan
Well,
probably not, right? Despite the
I,
fact that he was high rated at that point, I think he was 27.95 during the Grand Chess Tour in Croatia, the game that we just saw, and right now
yeah,
he's a bit less than that. But
but okay, everyone lost their rating a bit.
yeah,
Uh, so that's kind of like a recent phenomenon that like everyone seems to have dropped a bit of rating, which is normal. If someone drops rating, then the rating pool is going to get a bit. It's going to get more difficult to gain points, right? If like let's say Levon was 2780 and now he's 2740, obviously I'm going to
that's
be getting
crazy.
less
That's
rating from him
crazy. Yeah.
regardless of what my result is against him, right? So if everyone's losing rating, then it's normal that you're going to see a bit of a adjustment.
Hmm.
So I don't know what Ding's peak is because I don't know how like we have so little data on him recently. He played Vaikenze, he didn't do very well
I'll tell
in
you
the
the last
candidates.
his last two tournaments. So his last two tournaments obviously was um, uh, Vaikanze, in which he lost 25 rating points, a horrendous performance. I think he finished on -2 for the rating favorite. Sorry, Magnus was the rating favorite, but the second seed going into the event, quite significant lead. The only other player except Magnus over 2800, he did very poorly. So that was his last tournament, and before that, I think it was in October, some sort of a Chinese team championship in which he gained a little bit of rating, but he only played 25 2600s, so he didn't have the level of opposition that he will be facing in tournaments, in
Yeah.
elite level tournaments and in the world championship match.
Also like league games. I mean, of course they're still very relevant chess, but the level of competition is just less because there's less at stake. Like usually you just get paid per game, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like, you're let's say you're playing the Grand Chess Tour and the first prize is like 100 grand, then there's a lot at stake, right? You're playing the candidates and the first prize is a shot at the World Championship. There's a lot at stake. But some league games, right? It's a bit more of a relaxed atmosphere, and you can't compare it to a top tournament. You certainly can't compare it to a World Championship match, which is the highest amount of stress and um, amount of reward if you do well, right?
Yes.
So Ding is a bit of a wild card in terms of his form or his like on the one hand, I would think if you're inactive, it's probably going to lead to a bit of a drop in your ability because it's usually it's good to keep activity, right? It keeps you sharp. It also keeps you in practice in terms of like what to expect during tournaments. On the other hand, I'm sure he's working super hard, and that is always very good for your chess.
Yes.
So also we've seen Jan recently, not too much activity, which we
Let's
can
speak
naturally
about that
speculate.
as well. Since the candidates, since August 2022, he only played just a couple of tournaments. The Singfield Cup, that was in September, in which he did more or less okay. I think he finished on +1, gained a bit of rating, 1.4.
Well,
So
okay, wait,
not
did
a
he
bad
finish?
event.
I don't think he finished +1. So I'll explain why. Because he lost to Magnus in the first
He
round,
did. He
and he
did.
did not win 2 games after. He
He,
won 1 game after.
he did. He beat Firuja and he beat Aronian.
Ah, okay, you're right. Ah, yeah, that so he would have been +3 if he had won the last game against Hans Niemann.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I remember because he would have tied for first with Perugia. You're absolutely absolutely correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So he
Yes.
he, he finished +1, which was actually by tournament standings +2 because his game against Magnus did not get
Did
counted.
not count, but it did count for rating purposes,
Yeah, of course,
which
of
kind of
course.
sucks for him, but it is what
I
it
I
is.
mean, I would say more so that it's actually like was a great blessing for him because he his tournament standing increased despite the fact that his
That he
result was actually
actually, yes, you make a very good point there. And then more recently, which was a tournament in which he also had the opportunity to practice this time control that we just discussed. That was the WR Chess Masters, which just
Mhm.
finished in March, so not long time ago. He has some recent very high level games under his belt. He also did more or less okay in that one. He finished on +2, tied for first, went into a playoff in which Levon won that one. But I
I
would
think that tournament was a success for him.
say that's a success. He did very stable, right? He didn't lose any games. He won a
Also,
couple of games against Levon Aronian with black and against Keimer also with black.
but also the game against Levon was very impressive because the position was basically equal, and Levon was white. And at some point, Levon was trying to repeat moves because, of course, from a tournament standpoint, a repetition and a draw was good for him.
Yes.
And Jan showed a lot of confidence, and because he was sort of half gambling, but it was that sort of not gambling, but strategic or calculated risk that we were mentioning the difference, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, the calculated risk was because he was not gambling with bad moves, but he was gambling with decent moves, right? They weren't like leading to an advantage, but they were keeping the game complicated, and he had more time. And it was also the psychological situation where Levon wants to draw.
Yes.
So he won that game. I was very impressed with the manner in which he won. It showed a lot of confidence, which I think is a general facet of his personality, that he's a confident chess player.
Yes.
But also, more so, it's based now on just skill and not just confidence, but also because he is at the peak of his ability, from what I can tell. I can't say what the peak is, but he is at the strongest point that he's been at,
Mm-hmm.
and he realizes that he can outplay people, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a confirmation. So definitely that game at least, and okay, he lost the tiebreak to he lost two matches. First, he lost to Gukesh, and
But
uh,
that's more or less not that relevant, right? I would say.
I
Um,
mean it's relevant, but still, from the classical point of view, the classical games went very well, and he did tie for first. Okay, playoff didn't work out. It
he must
happens.
be happy because of his classical performance. And again,
Yeah.
classical under the time control that will be played at the World Chess
Well,
Championship. So quite cool.
That was definitely a strategic choice because
Yes.
the WR Masters was sponsored, or at least organized, by I think it's their friends and also
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Mm-hmm.
a sponsor
Mm-hmm.
of him.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the tournament was supposed to be sort of like a training ground for
Yes.
Jan to
Yes. Vadim, the organizer. Yes.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Speaking of those type of peaks, let's discuss, let's say, the beginning of his ascension, of Nepo's ascension at the FIDE Candidates tournament. Let's discuss the game between himself and Ding Liren at
Yeah.
the Candidates 2020-2021. You picked up
Yeah.
an interesting game. I think this was their first mid, right?
Yeah. So this was with the white pieces. Well, it was their first game. It was played in the. I'm trying to remember. It must have been the seventh, or maybe the sixth round, because I remember that Ding beat him in the last round of the candidates. But at that point, Nepo Jan had already won the candidates tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So that game was, from a tournament point of view, completely irrelevant. But Ding did actually beat him like in a crushing style, basically. Like Jan didn't have a chance out of the opening.
Yeah.
But in the first game they played, Jan was white
Mm-hmm.
and he played e4 as he's accustomed to do.
E5, yes.
E5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop b7. Ding showed his intention to play one of his favorite openings. As far as I can tell, at least until recent times, it has remained his main opening with black pieces. The
Mm-hmm.
Marshall
The Marshall,
defense. Yeah. He played it in all candidates that he played: 2018, 2020/21, and 2022. Ding used the Marshall. So he is, I would say, him and Magnus are the main experts in the Marshall with the black pieces. So because Magnus also, if we remember, was playing the Marshall with the black pieces against Jan in the match, right?
Yeah.
So the Marshall is a big sort of discussion ground for
Mm-hmm.
Jan, for Ding, for Magnus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bishop b7 d3.
Yes.
Jan didn't play this move in the match against Magnus. He was playing rook e1. If we remember, right?
Yes.
Played rook e1 several times. And then at some point he got frustrated and he stopped playing the Ruy Lopez entirely.
He played the other Gioco Piano, I think.
Yeah. And he also
Actually,
played
last
like
game.
c4 first move and so on.
Yeah.
So anyway, here he played d3 for sixth move, b5, bishop b3, d6, a3,
Mm-hmm.
castle knight c3. This is one of the main battlegrounds in the, you can call it the anti-Marshall if you want. White is avoiding the Marshall stuff with a3, knight c3, knight a5, bishop a2, bishop e6. This is kind of considered like the main way for black to defend against this knight a3, knight c3 line, although I would also argue that eighth move, knight a5, bishop a2, c5 is maybe even more of a reliable choice these days. Mm-hmm. But the way Ding played is super reliable for black from a theoretical point of view.
Bishop to e6,
b4, knight c6, bishop a2.
Rook takes a2, knight c6.
Actually, I think what I played, I'm trying to remember. So I played against Aronian in 2014 in the Singfield Cup. I think I took on e6, fe6, yeah. b4, knight c6. And then I played, like, at some point I played knight a2. I'm trying to remember what it was, like rook e1, d5, bishop d2, and then d4, knight a2, something like this.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm remembering correctly.
But he decides to go with b4, which is one of the main lines as well, right?
Yeah. Also, the point is, if black plays knight c6 now, then you have some kind of knight d5 stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is also a big theoretical dispute. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Ding took on a2, rook a2, knight c6.
Bishop g5.
Bishop g5.
Queen d7. I think they're still following some sort of main
I played another game against Levon, and he played knight to d7 instead of queen d7, mm-hmm. which is a funny thing. It's like knight d7, then the bishop goes back, and then black plays knight f6 again, because black just wants to play d5. So so basically black's saying, okay, I don't care where your bishop is. It can be on d2, on e3, anywhere you want. I'll play d5. But okay, Ding played queen d7. Take, knight d5, a5. This is all very, very standard stuff, although I think a5 is not, like, knight e7 is a move, bishop d8 is a move, but a5 is definitely a fine move. a5, rook b2, take. By the way, these guys were still undoubtedly in their preparation. ab4, bishop d8. I don't know if this is the best choice, but definitely it was still Ding's prep. c4, knight d4, take. They were for sure still in their prep. I don't know exactly when Ding went out. Maybe it was after queen c2. Mm-hmm. But maybe queen c2, because...
Well, queen c2 was definitely still Nepo's preparation, because at this point he didn't spend any time on his moves. He had 1 hour and 45 minutes. Yeah. I believe you guys were starting with 1 hour and 50 minutes. Is that? Like what,
I don't remember.
What was the time?
I don't remember.
It was either 150 or 145. So he basically didn't spend any time up to this point, and this is move 20.
Also, you can, like, tell that this is prep because, to start with, if, let's say, going back a few moves after knight d5.
Yeah.
I could get to this position, or people could get to this position just by playing natural moves. But nobody plays a5 without preparation. You just
Yes.
don't do it. You don't allow knight takes f6 unless you
Yes.
know that you can do this.
Yes.
And nobody plays rook to b2 without prep because it looks like you're surrendering the a file. Which why would you do that? You can play rook to a1. It's just
Mm-hmm.
they know that the details of the position are that white actually wants to achieve c4. So in that case, the rook on b2 is not so bad.
Mm.
But without prep, you just don't like this. These positional subtleties are too difficult to grasp unless you actually know the position.
Yep.
So
And
bishop d8 c4, also knight d4. It's not like a move that you play in. He took like 30 seconds.
yeah.
You don't play this in 30 seconds without prep because there's a move. Knight d4 changes the structure in a way which is um, hard to completely, let's say, understand if it's good or bad. Because on the one hand, the pawn on d4 could be good, or it could be that black is giving white a kingside majority, which is an advantage for white. And
Mm-hmm.
you have a move knight to e7 supernatural instead of knight d4,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't change the structure. So it's definitely a viable choice. So knight d4, he was in prep, queen c2, and that's why I think that at this point, Ding maybe got out of prep
Mm-hmm.
because he played a move which is questionable, rook to e8. But it's
And he
also natural.
also he also thought for like about 10 minutes for this move.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely he was out of preparation.
And my feeling for why g3 is also prep is because I don't know if the move really comes to mind. It kind of comes to mind that you want to play king g2 and you want to kind of get some
He
uh
gained time with this move, g3. I'm
yeah,
seeing the times, and Nepo actually gained time with this move.
yeah, that's why I think that most likely Jan was still in
Definitely
his prep.
still in his prep. Yes, yes.
So the question when he got out, most likely at this moment, but he kind of thing is Ding took on c4, queen c4, c6. So white's moves are forced. So it doesn't really matter if you're in your prep or not, because knight f4 is the only way not to lose a piece. So you
Mm-hmm.
play it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Bishop
after
g5.
bishop g5, knight e2 or knight g2 is the only choice, right? Because knight g2 is also knight e2 is more natural, but knight g2 could be calculated as well because um, the knight on e2 is kind of vulnerable to some kind of queen g4 stuff, right? And after knight e2, you kind of calculate d5 take. You can't take on d4 because bishop f6. So you put your queen on b3, and then there's some kind of like queen g4 ideas maybe.
Yes.
So there's some calculation to be done. Queen g4 in this case, I think queen takes d5
Yes.
um, is the
After
problem, right?
yes, yes,
And
yes.
so
You
so
cannot take on
h5,
a2 because the rook on a8 is hanging. And he played
h5, good
h5.
move.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of recognized, well, strategically, white's much better, right? I have these very bad d pawns, but I do have the option to attack white's king, which at the moment, the fact that all the pawns are on the d file, it means that basically white's pieces cannot get easily to the king side. So white is kind of defending with very few pieces.
Yes.
And you can't take on d4 because of bishop f6, right? So that's sort of that's the other thing. So basically, white has a trump, which is the b pawn, so he started pushing it. b5,
Mm-hmm.
h4, b6, and h3. Kind of standard stuff,
Yes.
basically trying to create a mating net. So it's a position of two clear ideas. White has the b pawn, very dangerous pawn. Black has a kingside attack.
Mm-hmm.
But then Jan plays a brilliant move, king h1, which isn't a difficult move because you don't want to get mated, and you realize the knight on g1, okay, kind of a funny piece in some ways. On the other hand, it all not only defends all the threats. Well, the only threat is queen to f3,
Mm-hmm.
but it defends that threat. But also, white keeps an eye on the h3 pawn, which means that the knight on g1 is performing two useful functions: stopping mate,
Mm-hmm.
obviously very useful, and also black's queen is tied to defensive h3.
Mm-hmm.
Because if black loses that pawn, obviously things are not going very well for black.
Exactly.
So black changes tack, which is I can no longer attack white because there's simply no way to break through this knight g1, king h1.
So I'm going to try to stop your b pawn.
So I have to win your b pawn. So rook eb8, rook f to b1. Jan is playing brilliantly, bishop d8. And after bishop d8, he starts to play less accurately, which I think was a bit of his impulsiveness on display. Queen b5 is kind of the, shall we say, intuitive move.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first move that comes to mind for me. If I was playing a blitz game, I'm playing queen b5, and if queen f5, then I'm probably gonna, I guess, go for knight takes
Try to go
d4.
for
I
knight
don't,
takes d4 or knight
but queen
d5.
b5 is the first move which comes to mind.
Yes.
But there was probably a stronger option in terms of b7,
Mm-hmm. Instead of
rook
queen to
a7,
b5.
knight f4, and black should take on b7, and I think this doesn't work out very well for black.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Queen
okay,
takes
queen
b7,
b5.
rook b7, take with a
Queen
better
g4 is a
position.
bad move. He had to play queen f5 with some kind of mess. Knight takes d4 and something
Still
happens.
feels like probably white is still in the driver's seat, even after this, let's say, slight inaccuracy, queen to b5, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think no, for sure white is better. The question is like, is black avoiding a loss at this point?
yeah, and he
But
uh he took on d5.
but I think that like I think black was kind of surviving with queen f5, knight d4, queen g4. I think it's like some crazy mess,
Right.
but black is sort of surviving by a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so queen g4 was not the right way.
Yes.
Queen d5, rook a5. Uh, by the way, instead of queen d5, I think it was just queen a8, king h7, queen f7, and he just rejected this on principle because he thought the pawn on d5 is like more attractive to take. But
Yes.
if he had played like this, I don't really think black has a way to fight on.
Yeah.
But maybe he saw
Rook to
rook b6,
b7.
bishop b6, and he stopped and he missed the move f3. That's possible.
Ah, very nice. Yes.
I think
f3.
that is maybe what he missed. But
And
he
then
was probably a bit in like blitzing mode.
yes.
And so queen d5, rook a5,
Maybe
queen
he thought
c6.
everything is winning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also possible that he just thought I'm winning. But actually, Ding missed a huge chance to save this game.
Yes.
After queen c6, he had rook takes b6 here. Rook b6, bishop b6.
After rook to a5 or
I sorry, rook b6, rook b6. Not bishop takes b6. Rook b6, rook b6, and queen e2.
after rook
And
to
black,
a5 or
yeah, after the move queen to c6, which is a mistake.
aha. So rook to a5, queen to c6. Yes.
Rook b6, queen e2. I think that this holds.
Yes.
Rook b8. It's a study. I mean, very study-like. Rook e5. Rook d8, king h7. And white is lucky to have a draw with rook h8, followed by queen c8, queen h3,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's some sort of draw.
Yes.
So it's not actually like a soup. I mean, it's difficult. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But if you're in a desperate mode, I think that you can find this. Although who knows, maybe Ding was in like massive time trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't remember the time situation, to
I
be
don't
honest.
think he was. Let's see. He had 56 minutes, it seems like, at this point.
Are we sure that this time is accurate?
No.
Okay. Because
No.
I don't know, like it feels
It,
like you
it,
find
it,
if you have an hour, you just find this if
it
you're Ding.
sounds a
And it's
bit
move
inaccurate.
33.
Yes, yes. It
It's move
probably is a
33.
bit inaccurate.
Okay, so he played rook c5, and after that, queen
Queen.
e8, king h7, knight g1. Uh, that was the game.
Yes.
Basically, white is up a pawn, f7 is falling, the pawn on b7 is moving forward,
Yeah.
and Ding went for last desperate attempt, which was rebuffed by this final move, 38 queen to h4, and that was it. Otherwise, white loses. It's just checkmate, but queen h4 trades queens, and that was the game.
Very nice. Beautiful game by NEPO. Some slips along the way, but definitely, I would say, a good performance. And I'm trying to remember what round was this from the candidates. Was this at the beginning of the candidates or?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure. So the candidates got postponed after round 7.
Right. So this was in the first half, right?
And in round 7, Jan had just lost a game against Maxime in the French. So
Right.
Maxime had beaten him, which means that this game was in round 6, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ding, he beat Ding. He went to +3. He lost to Jan. He went to +2. And sorry, he lost to Maxime.
Yeah.
They both went to +2. They were tied. At that point, the tournament was postponed. In the resumption, I beat Maxime.
Round
Maxime
6.
and I
Yes.
went to plus in round 8.
You're right.
Maxime and
Round
I went
6.
to +1. And then Jan pulled away by beating, I'm going to say Alexienko.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
after that, he didn't get caught
Yeah.
because I basically started drawing games and I lost to Anish. And Anish suddenly had like a slight chance to get in there, but he lost to Grishuk, and that was basically it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So so far. We would say 1-1, but definitely the trend is favoring NEPO. Now, we talked about the recent form, we talked about the current score, we talked about the time control. Let's talk about their experience in match play as well. Obviously, Jan has played already a World Championship match against Magnus. He knows what needs to be going into the preparation before the World Championship match. He needs what he knows what he needs to do during the championship match. He understands the pressure that comes with this type of situations. And this is something that you mentioned, and a lot of people that went through this process have mentioned before. It's that first round. That first round, when you see the cameras, when you start understanding what this whole ordeal means, and that feeling and that pressure starts settling in.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that as well during the first round in 2018?
During the first game of the match, I definitely felt a lot of pressure and stress, which kind of normalized, right? I kind of leveled that out a little bit as the match went on.
Yeah.
It was more like a first game sort of thing, or even like start of the game mostly, when like it suddenly hits you that you're actually playing a world championship match. I don't know if that holds, because okay, this concept of experience and Jan has played a match. Well, I can say that I played the candidates in 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022. And in 2016, I got very close despite it being my first time. In 2018, I won. In 2020, I was at my super experienced and didn't really work out. And in 2022, with all the experience in the world, um, I basically just couldn't hold it together emotionally at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you're experienced and even like in a vacuum what you're supposed to do doesn't mean that you can always follow through with that.
Yeah.
And Jan played his first candidates in 2020 that he had never played before, and he won. And then he played his second candidates in 2022, and he won that too. So just because it's your first whatever, it couldn't matter. Like for example, Wesley played his first candidates in 2018, and he started with 2 losses in the first 2 rounds. It was clear that something was off psychologically with him. He was a bit nervous or whatever. So yeah, it could.
It's this battle, yeah. This balance between experience and freshness, yeah. Freshness of the experience, and whenever you go into an experience with a fresh mind, sometimes you also have that extra energy, yeah. Extra positive mindset, things of that nature that help you with the end result.
Yeah, I mean, I have this general feeling that since we don't have much data on this stuff, we can't really draw conclusions because we just don't know. There haven't been too many world championships in history, and I don't think they follow any clear pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if we can really say for sure. Like, I guess usually the champion tends to defend their title, I would guess. But actually, I'm not sure if that's even true. But in this case, there's also no defending champion. And I think maybe in the past that was also because the champion had the draw odds, right? Where
Yes.
the match is drawn, for example, Kramnik and Leko, they drew a match in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Leko was leading going into the last round. Kramnik won the last round, and that was it. There was no tiebreak. He just defended his title via the tied score. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if that's the case, right? That the defending champion has a plus. But in this case, yeah, it's two guys who one has a bit more experience, one has less. I don't know if this experience counts for much because it's not like he's been playing world championship matches his entire life. I mean, he played one match.
Match. What? Well,
yeah.
I guess let's build up on that. What would you have done differently in a second attempt at the world championship match? Let's try to build up on that experience.
Okay, but this is a bit of a okay, I can say in hindsight, I would have spent all my time analyzing the Rosalimo and the Sveshnikov.
Forget about the opening play. Let's just talk about the way you approach each individual game psychologically. Maybe in terms of logistics, whether you bring a chef with you, things of that nature. What would you do differently?
Well, I mean, I think that what I did was, I mean, seriously prepared, and I had a good team. I had serious preparation. My openings were as good. I mean, I couldn't have predicted his opening choice, but as good as we could have done.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Again, the opening choice is not that relevant because it's pretty
I
much impossible to guess.
Yeah, I was in good form. I mean, the quality was actually quite high throughout the classical games. Uh, Maybe the first game quality wasn't high. I missed two chances. One chance was basically you can't even fault it because it was at the end of like a 6 hour plus game. I missed a study like sort of end game
Yeah,
win.
yeah, yeah.
Other chance I can fully regret, but can you psychologically prepare for? Yeah, I rushed this moment. I didn't like calculate it fully through. I was kind of playing on intuition a little bit. This H3 and Queen H5 moment.
Yeah.
This would be my main regret in terms of missed chances. But yeah, I was in good form. It was a close match. The tiebreak didn't work out, but this was, I think, for reasons that
But
weren't fully in my control.
but
Uh,
you wouldn't say that you would do something completely differently
no, no, no,
or
nothing.
add any sort of extra aspects that you would be focused on before the event based on your experience of that first match.
No, if I was playing a match right now, I would basically go through the same sort of things. I would maybe change some physical aspects a little bit. I would do things physically a bit different,
Mm-hmm.
like in terms of how I'm trying to get my physical form together. Maybe I would focus a bit more on sports, and because it's such a long match, you kind of have to be in physical shape. But I wouldn't change things fundamentally so much. Maybe I would get a chef for the match.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would be one change. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like we prepared as best we could,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad preparation and it wasn't a bad match.
No, no, of course not.
It was yeah, you know, things didn't work out on the final day of the match. That was basically it. I
Cool.
mean, you know as well as I do, right? But
Yes.
if I were to give Ding or if I were to give Ding advice, I would say like physically the guy seems a little bit frail to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not like trying to insult him. I'm
No, of
just
course
saying
not.
that
We're
his physical form is something that I think could be a hindrance
I was just
because
about to ask you that whether you think that's going to. Right now we're just speculating because probably these guys, they don't have enough time and resources and to become bodybuilders or to add
no,
20
but
pounds
you
of
don't want to
muscle
become a
or things of
bodybuilder,
that nature.
right?
Um,
You
but
want to have like if
stamina,
you're
it's all about the
yeah,
stamina, right?
your ideal physical form should be that you're not in pain, you're not in physical pain, so it's not distracting you, which is I think still a difficult thing because if you're 30 years old and you're not in great shape, you could have some aches and pains, and it's not what an athlete wants, right? So that's still difficult, but there are ways, of course, to making sure that you're not in any sort of pain, that you have, let's say, good strength for your body weight, whatever that is, that you have good mobility, that you don't have injuries. Um, then the next thing is that you want energy,
Mm-hmm.
which well, there's mental energy and there's physical energy, and physical energy is pretty easy, I guess, right? Pretty straightforward. Um, that you have good stamina, that you have good conditioning. Mental energy is a bit more, I guess, that you don't that you have a way to relieve your stress,
Mm-hmm.
which everyone will have their way after during tournaments, right? To make sure that they're not under excessive stress because obviously stress is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say like I didn't manage this during the candidates, so I can't say that this is an easy thing. It's probably the hardest thing is finding a way to make sure that you're not constantly in your head, that you're constantly under stress, and this exhausts you mentally.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Sports are obviously a good way. I think Ding does like sports. I think like he's mentioned, I've heard in the past mentioned as a good
Basketball.
basketball player, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's good to have sports. We know Magnus uses that as a therapeutic or stress relieving way. Like during every tournament, basically, we hear about him doing something skiing,
Mm-hmm.
football,
And
soccer, whatever you want
even
to call
during the event, He very often does that.
during like
S-
yeah, during the match he came at some point in with like an injury, right? Because he got injured
he played
playing
soccer during one of the rest
soccer,
days.
yeah, and he
Yeah,
got injured playing football. So Ding, the reason why I say that he's like maybe not in great physical shape is um like I do remember him getting seriously injured during one tournament. It was Norway chess, and the tournament he had to leave the tournament. He played 3 games, and then on the rest day, I think it was a rest day, he breaks his hip.
he fell off a bike, right? If I'm not mistaken.
From what I remember, he fell off a bicycle, he breaks his hip, which is a very unusual thing for a mid-20s guy
Yeah,
to break your hip, right?
yeah.
It's like
That's a
this is
serious
not a
injury.
bone that is easily broken.
That's a serious injury. Yeah, yeah.
So and but the thing is, I don't know if it really affects his play because he does go through these long tournaments and he doesn't fade away at the end.
Yeah.
So it could be that he has a very strong mental reserve, that he kind of has this approach to tournaments where it doesn't uh like he's very level-headed maybe or whatever it is, and he doesn't seem to get flustered or sometimes people get tired because of overambition, right? They're just like constantly putting stress on themselves, like I need to win this game, I need
Yeah. Yeah.
to do this, or because of their expectations, like I'm going to win the tournament, I'm going to win the tournament, don't fuck it up.
Yeah.
So so there's a lot of ways. Maybe he has a very healthy psychological approach. I think he probably does, but wouldn't hurt him to also be in his top physical shape, and I guess the same would go for Jan.
Cool.
But Jan is a much bigger, physically bigger person, right?
Yes.
Than Ding. So
So he probably has
uh,
some reserves, energy reserves for sure. And he's not known to be a player that fades physically, but fades occasionally psychologically, right? Especially when he starts losing, which doesn't happen to him very often recently. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah, I wouldn't say Jan is someone who seems like he's tired at the end of the tournaments.
no, no, no,
Um,
no.
but neither is Ding. Like Ding, we do have to remember, although he didn't like qualify from the purely normal way,
Hmm.
still everyone knew that there was this chance near the end of the candidates that
Second
at
place
least
would play the
yeah,
championship.
there was a
Yeah,
chance. And so this game of him against Hikaru
that was
from
huge,
the
massive, massive.
yeah, like we can say what we want about whether second place is real qualification or not, but um there was this hint that maybe maybe second place will qualify.
Yeah,
And so this game between Hikaru and Ding, it was probably in the back of their mind that, well, it might not matter, but it might matter. So this could be a very important game. And Ding did win that game. Uh, yeah, that was an important game. You could almost call it a clutch victory, considering in hindsight. Of
yes.
course, if Magnus had decided to play, then yeah, we would have said kind of irrelevant game. Uh, but in hindsight, obviously a very clutch game.
All right. Before we go into the final, I would say analysis, and that is regarding their seconds, their team, the playing venue. We'll analyze that briefly as well, and things of that nature. Let's go and follow and analyze the last game that you prepared, the one from last year's candidates, which NEPO won with the black pieces in the first round, in fact.
Yeah. So again, we see an opening we saw before: C4, Ding first move, C4, E5, G3, knight of, and in this case, instead of knight of 6, as we saw in the game from Zagreb,
Mm-hmm.
Nepo Jan played C6.
Mm-hmm. Knight of 3.
C6 is considered a very, very good move. Either knight of 6, bishop G2, C6, or C6 immediately. Both are good moves. Um, but this is kind of considered maybe the problem with G3.
Mm-hmm.
So C6, knight F3, D4 is
E4.
also a move.
Yes.
Like D4, E4, I mean, people try to find ideas here with white. I think that Levon recently won a game against Gukesh in this line after D5. So yeah, white does also try
But
D4. Anyway,
supposedly these things are more or less not equal, but people know what to do against them.
yeah, well, the thing is, of course, it's equal, but everything is equal. So the point is not to find a place where white is better because this is an impossible task, but the point is to try to find a place where you can get some idea which is unfamiliar to your opponent. And then you get a game, then you know it a bit better, and then maybe you get an advantage.
That's right.
So knight f3, e4, knight d4, d5. Take, queen takes, all standard theory. Knight c2, knight f6, knight c3, queen e5, bishop g2, knight to a6. Now, if you don't know the line, of course, knight a6 is a kind of unusual move. Why wouldn't you play bishop b7? If you know the line, it's standard theory.
Mm-hmm. Castle. Bishop e7 now.
Yeah.
Knight e3.
Bishop e7.
Castle.
Knight e3, castle a3. I actually think that Ding got the first surprise in. I think this knight e3 and a3 was a surprise for Jan.
Okay.
And so the problem wasn't an opening problem because I actually think that Ding got a very good position. And I think this line is a little bit like you can definitely play with black. It's probably a very decent line.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I would play it in a match when the cost of a game is very high because it does feel like the general choice of moves that white has here, the amount of options that white has here is probably very high. So if someone is going for it, I'm a little bit scared that they're going to get the first surprise in with white because I don't know if I can remember all the moves that white has here. I don't know if I can even that I can repair all the moves or predict what my opponent's going to do. And I also don't know, even if I do analyze everything perfectly, that I will remember all the subtleties of this position. And it's also a bit confusing. Like, basically, it feels like a bit of a vague position, so you can't really go based on calculation.
Yeah.
So knight e3, castle a3, rook e8.
Rook e8, b4.
Kind of a sign, I think, rook e8 that Jan did not know this line, did not know this knight e3, a3 idea.
Yep.
e4, knight g4. Also, you don't play like this if you've prepared the line because this is not what the computer likes at all.
Yeah. Knight g4, bishop to b2. White is slowly building a slight edge in the position. Bishop to f6 after queen to h5, h4. Queen to c2, knight takes e3, d takes e3, bishop to f5. Knight to a4.
Yeah, I guess this is where it starts to go wrong.
This is the critical position, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, like, it seems like they were both not playing perfectly accurately here. But knight to a4 is probably, it's a very natural move. It's actually the first move that I would think of, like b5 or knight a4. It's kind of, you want to sort of get this knight to somewhere nice, this knight on a4, and you want to trade off the bishops. But after bishop takes b2, it feels like he took in the wrong way. It feels like queen takes b2 is probably the correct way. And knight takes b2, I understand what he wanted. But it also feels like something went really wrong with his thought process because queen b2, it's pretty clear that white has plenty of ideas. For example, knight c5 is an idea, just rook ad1 is an idea, and b5 is an idea. And knight takes b2, it's taking a lot of pressure off black's position. The only idea is I want to get the knight to d6. But after knight c7, knight c4, rook e6, this knight doesn't really come to d6, does it? And you got rid of all your b5 ideas, which was like, you wanted to break up black structure because from a kingside point of view, you have the restricted g2 bishop. Black's pieces are all kind of eyeing the king there. And you can't really get because of these doubled e-pawns, you can't get your pieces to the king side at all.
Yes.
So
that's a good point.
Knight takes b2, definitely a very serious mistake, probably the main mistake in this game. Rook d1, knight d5 already is like, I mean, I would be terrified because unless you get rid of this e4 pawn, how do you stop black's attack of just like very blunt attack, g5 and so on?
Opening up G5, the h-file, checkmating, basically, yeah.
That's why he played rook d4. He's kind of trying to threaten e4. I think it turned out that like g5 was very strong here.
Yes. He played
h6. And then if like hg5, queen g5, I don't think you can take on e4, which is the main problem, right?
No, because of rook takes c4, rook takes c4, and queen to g6. Yes.
Knight d2 and knight to f6. Okay, so basically rook d4 is an empty move in that case because it doesn't threaten to take on e4. So it doesn't really meet the demands of the position. It's the most natural move, which also maybe is not a good move.
Yes. h6, queen to
h6,
d2.
Queen d2, I just don't understand. Like, I really don't get it. I mean, you can show me this position and I don't understand the evaluation. I don't understand what the best move is. I can probably figure out that you can't take on e4 with the bishop, which most people will figure out, right? For the same reason, take knight f6. But moves that come to mind might be, for example, knight to a5 is the first move that comes to mind. Then I'm going to be terrified because g5, and I don't think the b7 pawn matters that much.
Yeah.
b5 might come to mind with the idea I take on c6, followed by knight a5, and so on. And I might reject that because of g5. Then the other move which may come to mind is rook d1 because I'm thinking, okay, at some point I'll take on d5. For example, g5, I'm thinking, okay, rook takes d5. I don't know what happens here, but I'm at least a lot less scared once I get rook d5 because I'm not going to get checkmated. I might be worse because I'm down material, but I'm not going to get checkmated because the bishop on f5 is pinned and black is basically losing a lot of his attacking potential without the knight.
Yeah.
So rook d1, supernatural. Queen d2, like it's still kind of threatening to sack an exchange, but not really because I don't want the queen on d5. I want the rook on d5.
And then you also release the defense of the pawn on e2, which might become
Well, it's the reason why you can't really
crucial
take on
as
d5
well.
also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So queen d2 just makes no sense. And then he rook a8, he probably I think he was like thinking queen d2, g5, and calculating rook d5 and something there. And then rook e8 came as a surprise.
Yes.
And then he realized, yeah, probably things are not working out anymore. And he was in panic. So he played king h2 with idea g5, rook h1. A standard kind of defensive way. G5, rook h1, gh4, king g1, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Standard defensive method of dealing with g5.
Pinning on the h5 like that. Yeah. Yeah.
But then bishop g4 came.
Yes.
Now you have to deal with the e pawn. So it's not only that g5 threat, but now if rook e1, then suddenly, right, there's g5.
Mm-hmm. The
And
rook is the
so
defense of the e2 pawn.
so knight a5 is pure desperation. I think it's kind of like knight a5 is basically, yeah, you're going to attack me and probably mate me, but maybe I'll get a pawn and I hope for the best.
Yeah. Rook
Bishop g4 is,
f6,
yeah,
king g1, g5, knight takes b7, pick up that pawn, but after g takes h4, this is just pretty much all
knight
she
c5.
wrote.
Maybe he thought knight takes e4 is kind of going to come in time, but obviously does not. Or
Yeah.
it's not obvious, but as the game made clear, it does not come in
Yeah.
time. The end of the game was very beautiful. After king g7, if he plays king takes g2, there's rook takes f2. I think it's the only like clean way to win. King h2, queen h2,
Yeah, very nice.
king e1, queen g1, checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
So very beautiful finish,
Beautiful finish, yeah.
but Jan was not under pressure to find this finish because he had plenty of time, and it's clear that something's going to work out for Black here. There's too many pieces attacking.
Yeah, and just to show the end of the game, f4, pick up the rook on a1, bishop to h3, beautiful finish to force the checkmate. Very nice game.
Bishop h3 is cute. I mean, Black's up a piece,
Jan.
so it doesn't matter too much what he does, but Bishop h3 is very cute.
Very nice game by Jan. So no, that's important, you know, because these type of losses, they stay in your mind, right? When is the last time Ding beat Jan? 2019, right, in a classical match. It's been quite a few years since that happened. How do you think that's going to affect him?
Look, I think Jan has the upper hand in terms of recent games. I don't think it means a huge amount because they played so seldomly, but definitely Jan is not going to have any lack of confidence playing Ding. He's not going to think I can't beat this guy because as we see in these complicated fights recently, twice he has beaten him, he has outplayed him. I think that he definitely can outplay him very seriously. On the other hand, if Ding is in good shape, he can outcalculate him. I think that Ding is a more accurate calculator, but Ding is going to have to deal with a lot of pressure in the games, right? Jan is one of these like intuitive, sort of dynamic, aggressive players. He might not always calculate perfectly, but he has a lot of very good qualities in terms of his intuition, feeling for initiative, and so on. Ding is probably a better like overall calculator. I mean, maybe a more complete guy in that sense.
Perfect.
So yeah, they're a bit stylistically different. For me, the interesting thing will be the openings, of course, because we know they're both very strong, but how are they going to make inroads in terms of like, okay, let's say Ding comes with his Marshall he might choose a different opening, but let's say he comes with his marshal and his e4. And the thing is, you these days in modern chess and classical chess, you don't have many places to turn to with white. Like if you play e4, you have to deal with the Berlin. It's very difficult. You have to deal with the marshal as well and a bunch of other annoying openings, but really the Berlin is a big headache for people. Or you can go to the Italian. This is what I would think is maybe a natural refuge. Ding plays one line very consistently against the Italian. He's played it for years and years, and it's very reliable. He played it in the candidates. He played it against Nakamura. Um, the Italian is a place where you have a lot of room for creativity. On the other hand, Black can basically play like 55,000 lines.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with that. That's annoying. Um,
Well, speaking of this, opening jungle, let's kind of discuss that and speculate a little bit. It's a good segue because one of the rumors is that one of Ding's seconds is Richie Rapport. He has been spotted
yeah, I
in
heard that.
Astana at breakfast with Team Ding. So he might be part. We don't know for sure. It's a speculation at this point, but he might be part of his team of seconds. We know, and everybody knows, that Richie is a very creative player. He can start with e4 followed by f4. He can do a lot of completely nonsensical stuff and still get a game out of them. Do you think that can maybe be a possibility to try to
Well,
avoid all these unpleasant main lines?
yeah, so I like Richie a lot. I worked with him a tiny, tiny bit, not very much. But in 2019, we were working a little bit, just like one session for a few days. But he's a very nice person. He's a very strong player, very interesting player. He has a lot of interesting ideas in the opening. If I were thinking of a second, um, and okay, I generally try not to work with people who I have direct competitive uh, rivalries with.
Yeah.
And Richie is one of like the top guys in the world, so I don't know. I would hesitate, um, let's say to invite him to candidates because we might have to play at some point too. But for a guy for a match, yeah, it's a very interesting choice. I would also consider asking Richie to work with me
Mm-hmm.
if I were in Ding's position. So it's definitely an interesting choice. I don't know what it will mean in terms of openings because you can have all the creativity in the world, but these days it's difficult. It's really difficult to be creative in openings because computers have really narrowed things a lot. And over the last few years, things have gotten a lot more difficult to be creative.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can say that because I do try to find creative ideas. But in Rapid and Blitz, yeah, you can find a million. In classical chess, it's very different because first of all, you're going to always have a level of knowledge that your opponent has. You're not going to surprise your opponent early on. Even if you play knight f3, b3, people still know what they're doing there. So so first you have to breach that moment where there's knowledge, right? Like I know my opponent will know these certain things. If I play the Italian, I know my opponent will know about bishop g5 lines. I know they'll know about this and that. If I play first move c4, e5, g3, I know they'll know that they can play c6 and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Then I need to find the point where I feel like their knowledge ends. And then I can think, well, at this point, their knowledge is probably over. Um, and I can make like educated guesses on that based on, uh, you know, like let's say general knowledge of a position. And people at some point have to stop analyzing, and they probably stop analyzing in a point where they feel like they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Then I have to decide, okay, they're comfortable in this position, but maybe even though they're still comfortable, there is uh, some way to maybe get a game or outplay them with this move.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you try to get creative. Then the question is which opening, because people are universal; they can play everything. Ding is more of a D4 player. Nepo is maybe more of an E4 player, but still they can do whatever they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we saw Ding experimenting with the Caro-Kann and different stuff in Vaikense. So if I'm thinking like I can play any opening with white, and I have a general idea of what my opponent wants, where my opponent wants to go. I know if I'm Ding and I play the Catalan, then I know that Jan has basically two places he's likely to go. He can either play the bishop e7 stuff, classical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
involving this pawn sacrifice, which he played against Magnus in the match, which is considered super, super difficult to break down. And Dubov spoke a little bit about this. They found one idea in this whole b5 pawn sacrifice in the Catalan.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
Mm-hmm.
Hikaru plays it like religiously,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
every
yeah,
game he plays it.
yeah,
He's played like 30 games in this obstacle or bishop endgame where he holds a draw every time.
yeah.
Uh, and they found one idea, which was the pawn sacrifice, which Magnus employed, which is a bit of a speculative pawn sacrifice. It was a good try, but it's a one game try.
Yeah.
Can I find new ideas there? The other problem is, even if I find new ideas there, maybe Jan wants to play the c5 Catalan. Also, really tough to find ideas there. Of course, I have all the time in the world to prepare, but still, these two places, even if I find an idea, even if I find ideas in both places, are they still ideas just for one game? And then I have to think about the remaining 12 games.
Mm-hmm.
Can I build a repertoire around this?
Seven
Uh,
games with each color. I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a lot.
Sorry.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of games. And very often, even if you find a small idea, it's still slight advantage, still very likely to be a draw.
Yeah.
So I want a complete repertoire. Can I do it in the Nimzo? Well, maybe the E3 Nimzo. There is some
Maybe
room for
some Nimzo
creativity
stuff.
there.
Yeah.
There is. On the other hand, yeah, you allow black basically like I'm not terrified when I face the E3 Nimzo. I know it'll be a game. Um, I would definitely look at the E3 Nimzo as a place to look. Queen C2 Nimzo, I feel kind of hopeless. Um, if I'm like classical Ding style, basically classical Ding style is D4 knight of 6, C4 E6, knight of 3 D5 knight C3. Here I have one big problem. I have a few small problems, and then I have one big problem. The small problems are that the Rogozin is a good opening.
I feel
The
like I feel like you're giving away all the top secrets. You know?
Well, no, okay, this is like what everyone knows, of course. I mean, the Rogozin is a good opening, the Semislav is a good opening, Bishop E7 is a good opening, and then you have the main problem, which is that the whatever you call this C5, the neo semi towers or whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
C5, CD5, CD4.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone is ready to do this,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's kind of a draw from an objective point of view.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of annoying, right?
Yeah.
So, from a world championship match point of view, I don't know if I feel comfortable trying to break down this, but this is Ding's natural go-to place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he plays knight f3, knight c3. He played in Kansas against me. We played Rogozin and so on. Will Ding or Nepo go to e4, play the Italian? I would think this is a very interesting
Ding.
place to search for
I mean,
ideas.
Nepo for sure, yes. But Ding to switch it up and play the e4. I mean, that would be a huge surprise in my opinion.
Yeah, but you have to be flexible. I don't know. Maybe for Nepo it would be interesting. But the question is, what is Nepo avoiding? Is he avoiding an anti-Marshall or an anti? Is he avoiding Berlin?
Yeah.
Would Ding go for the Berlin is also an interesting question because the Berlin is a great opening, but that doesn't mean that you want to go for it, right? You because he could just love his Marshall
Do
and it's
we
a great
know?
opening too.
Do we know anything? So we kind of discussed. We know Richie as one of the seconds. Nihu, I think I've seen a picture of him as well, but I don't know anybody else on Team Ding. Do we know anybody on Team Nepo for sure?
I don't know for sure, but back in the candidates, why would his team have changed? So what was the
So
candidate?
Leko was there.
Wait. Candidates, I remember two guys were there. So let me think. It was Hyrulin,
Hyrulin and
Ildar
Vityukov,
Hyrulin,
right?
and Vityugov were in at the candidates with him.
All right.
Two of them. So I don't know for sure, but I would guess that these two same guys are there
Now, one of the
on the
main
team.
coaches for a very long time and a good friend of Nepo was Potkin. Did you see Potkin during the candidates?
No, I did not see him there. I don't know if they're still working together. Yeah, they were good friends and worked for years
So
and years.
this might be a big change, right, compared to the first World Championship match of Nepo, because Potkin was his main coach by far. We also know that Karyakin joined. That's not going to happen anymore because I think there's been some quarrels between them. So Karyakin is out. Maybe speculation. Obviously, don't quote us on that. Perhaps Potkin, his main coach for many years, is out as well.
Yeah, I
Vityukov,
don't know. I mean,
Hyrulin.
like
Who
so
else?
it's very important the team around a player, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because you can have a team that's very good. You can have guys who are very good, but they aren't just the right guys for the job necessarily. And you can't really know that because it's very much based on some personality stuff and how people collaborate well together. So I don't know. Like it's going to be a very important decision who these guys are working with.
Yeah.
But if you tell me they're working with this person, that person, I don't really like I can't tell you if it matters or not because I
Yeah.
don't know um from an opening point of view, I don't know if it matters so much as long as you get a guy who can analyze well, which these days it's much easier to analyze, right, than
Hmm.
before. Just the tools are much more accessible
Yes.
and and make the job easier. Then yeah, like for me, team discussions, you can say a lot of names, but I don't know how much it how much I can speculate on if it matters or not. Of course,
And
it
I'm
does
sure
matter.
we will probably find out more details about their respective teams as more information comes out from Astana, and the reporters start taking more and more pictures. See a lot of people.
So I have a question. Do you know who plays white in the first game?
Yes, Nepo plays white in the first game
Okay, yeah, it'll be interesting to see because we'll get a lot of information just on his approach, and they're both their approaches from the
from the
first
first
game,
set of games, right?
from the first move,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
And then we'll see, um, is Jan going to go searching around? Like if you play kind of C4 first move, I feel like you're going to go hunting,
yes.
right? If you play E4 first move, I feel like you're going to try to, go with some sort of repertoire that you're going for the match.
Hmm.
That's kind of my general feeling. It's two different approaches. Do you go like searching for weak points, just probing like Magnus style in the match against me, or in general his approach, it seems, or do you go, sort of
I
standard?
Yeah, but I feel that's something only a very few, maybe handful of players can do, and I'm not 100% sure either Nepo or Ding are
But it's the
in
standard
those
practice these
handful of
days.
players. Just
Like
go probbing, yeah.
going back 5 years, it was a bit unusual, but these days it's standard practice.
Just
You
because you
know,
can find ideas faster with the engines, yeah.
well, I think more so because people have just hit their head against the Berlin for so long. I mean, we still try. Like I've been trying,
We still
I've
try,
been trying
yes.
this past week against Lekwang and Artemiev, and Hikaru also plays the Berlin. I
Yeah,
mean, it's like everyone plays Berlin.
yeah.
You try, and then at some point you get frustrated. Like I played, 8 Berlin games in a row, and I
Maybe
used up all my 2 ideas in these 8 games, and yeah, at some point you're like, okay, got to mix it up. Of course, for a match you have a lot more
maybe
time
the
to.
Berlin endgame. I mean, look, I was kind of impacted by the fact that Sam Shanklin was able to get advantages out of the opening against Ray Robson. Obviously, Ray Robson is his preparation is probably not at the level of 8 months of camp, but at the same time, maybe the Berlin endgame is somewhere to look for
Well,
ideas.
so Sam tried against not only against Ray, right? He also tried against Lanier. And every few years, I'm like, okay, let's give the Berlin Endgame another shot
Hmm.
at analysis. And then my feeling is just general feeling based on like from an ideal point of view, the Berlin Endgame is where the problems for Black should lie, right? From a practical point of view,
Yeah,
like it's where you should test Black.
yeah,
And then you start to analyze it, and it's like every move equalizes, every line, everything.
yeah.
And how do you like you can do it, but you have to have a certain amount of faith that your opponent will mess up.
Yes.
So this is like, well, I mean, I respect it. Like I respect that Sam was trying, and he actually did get some chances, but he did not also like really win many games, right?
Yeah.
It's really tough because even if you get an advantage, it still feels like it's the tiniest of tiny things. On the other hand, with Black in the Berlin game, I can speak from experience. You kind of feel some pressure. It's because you know that everything's equal, but then
You
things
have
are
to
not so
prove it.
easy over the board.
You have to prove it. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, Berlin Endgame, anti-Berlin, Italian. Um, that's assuming Ding even goes for the Berlin because the Marshall is not an easier target either. I mean, Marshall is a real headache. But if you told me I have 6 months to prepare against a guy who only plays Marshall, I would think, okay, I'll take on this task, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'll give it a shot.
Cool. Well, Fabi, I think look, we've covered so many topics. We've talked about the seconds, the experience that these players going to this match with. We talked about their over the board games, the last 3 decisive games that they played, recent form, current score. We covered pretty much everything. It's probably time to give our official predictions. So it'll take it. Take it away.
Yeah, I'll give a slight nod. I've stayed consistent with this, a slight nod to Jan, very slight, but that would be my if on a 50-50 bet, that would be my pick.
Yes, I will probably go with the same. I feel like I should probably be against you, but I've been saying this for a very long time. I've given some interviews and I've been on the Perpetual Chess podcast. I said it at that time that Jan probably has between 55 to 60% chances of taking it from the simple fact that he has more experience. I feel he's going to know what to do better at the beginning of the match in those critical moments of the match, as well as his pre-match preparation. I feel it's going to be better. So
Yeah, it'll be a
I'll take Jan.
tough one.
I'll take
Very
Jan,
close.
but
For
this
sure,
this
very
one is
close.
going to be close. It's going to be
It
a
might
lot
go
of
the
fun.
distance too.
You think
Might go
so?
full 14 games and a tiebreak. I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh wow.
Um, I don't know. I mean,
That's when
14.
I differ. That's when I differ to you. I think this one is going to be over in 13 games.
Okay. Well, that's a very specific one, but okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. All right. Let's finish it off with some advice for our viewers. Please like, subscribe if you've enjoyed this podcast, this analysis of the upcoming World Championship. I think it's one of the most thorough analyses that you can find anywhere. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, share it with your friends, and we will also be doing a lot of coverage throughout the World Championship match. Our plan as of right now is to do game analysis after every single game. So we're going to try to keep up with that as much as possible, but that is the current plan. So if you don't want to miss any of that, don't forget to do all of the things that we just discussed. Like and subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notifications whenever we post a new video. So with that being said, I'm excited. It's going to be a fun match. I feel there's less pressure attached to this match, but still that allows us to have more fun. That allows the players to potentially be a bit more creative as well. I'm excited about it. The match starts in a few hours. We're going to call it a night because we still have to edit this and put it out. So we'll see you on the next video.
Yeah. Good night, everyone, and happy Easter.
Happy
Match
Easter.
starts on Easter Sunday.
There we go. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.